Welcome to Talking to Lawyers. I am your host, Conrad Salmon, and today we have two amazing guests and a familiar face. So we are joined by Cameron Killmer and Harlan Schillinger, both of Docket, as well as Mockingbird's very own Robert Williams. We're going to be talking a lot about intake awesomeness, not just good, but absolutely fantastic, and the systems and the data and the processes behind what it takes to get there. There's a lot of highly tactical elements to this, which I'm excited about. I like presenting tactical things. And the other thing that all of you will get out of this is Rob's experience working with lots of different systems, as well as what the lead docket Filevine ecosystem brings together. So Rob has got this kind of really wide experience, and you're going to see what Mockingbird has built for our clients who are not on a lead docket Filevine, and then juxtapose with exactly what lead docket Filevine has done in order to provide what I really consider business, like these really foundational business metrics, instead of getting caught in the miasma of, it's not wasted digital marketing stuff, but it can be distracting at best. And so I really want us to start focusing on the things that are driving your law firm business as opposed to anything else. So without further ado, as I promised, we're starting precisely on time, is 1 o'clock my time. A couple of things. As Harlan Schillinger, Harlan and I have known each other for probably on a decade. We run into each other in conferences over and over again. And Harlan, you weren't here when we went through this. This intro makes it look like Cameron is married to his sister, which I didn't realize when I grabbed this off the internet, and that Rob and I are a couple going to a Christmas party. Also, so it's a little bit deceiving.
Where did you get this picture of me? That's a little older picture, but that's a stunning picture. Gee whiz.
It is. It's a great pic. Yeah. And you look like nothing has changed.
I just want to say one thing before we start, if you don't mind. The most important thing, and you said it, you hit it on the head. I know we're going to talk about lead docket and all, but the truth of the matter is, no matter what system, it's important to use some kind of a system. The metrics are so vitally important. You got to make decisions. But whether you use lead docket or something else, this all applies.
There's so much to doing this. And I feel like the marketing industry has been so far behind for so long, and it's now time that we've caught up. And I use these examples. These are the things that are important. This is really simplistic, but do you know how many and not leads, but consultations? Because you guys do not want to talk about leads. You guys, and in your vernacular, in the Filevine lead docket vernacular, this is an opportunity, right? You want to be talking about the consultations. Why are you talking to marketing agencies that are still talking about the leads that they generate for you? And then you can take this further. Why don't you know where your clients are coming from? And that is the entire solution that you should be talking about on the regular. There's so many things that become really important when you're looking at consultations, leads, clients, etc. These things operate fundamentally very differently. And we know, and Rob and I know this very well, your pay-per-click campaign is going to operate very differently from your LSA campaign from a conversion perspective, which is going to operate very differently from your local campaigns versus your SEO campaigns. Like, it's all very fundamentally different. If you only stop at the leads portion, you start missing out on some of this vital data. And so these are just kind of high level concepts, but what we're going to get into in depth is how Mockingbird and how Filevine lead docket think about getting to this type of insight, which is so unbelievably important in setting this up and running your business like a business.
And Conrad, I do believe that, and again, it's not a question of maybe a right or wrong, but I do believe in looking at leads. Because as an advertising agency, an advertising person, I want to see everything that's coming in. And what you don't know, you don't know. And if I'm getting an abundance of poor leads, I got to know that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Extremely important, especially when you're spending money on per lead things, right? Like local service ads.
I was going to note too, to piggyback on Harlan's point, I think knowing your leads, your opportunities or your consultations, and the number of clients you're getting, that's foundational things, right? And I know this webinar is on advanced tactics, but I think in 2022, nearing 2023, operating a business, those are fundamental metrics that you have to have an understanding of. And Harlan's right. Like whether you use Lead Docket or another system, you need to use something in order to understand that data.
And
I think it's important that firms start thinking that way.
My gut is this: the audience here is going to be bifurcated into people who are Lead Docket Filevine clients who are like, yeah, no crap, guys, who are already looking at this data, and some of the people that we talk to who are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So let's just understand it. To some extent, we may be preaching to the choir. To the other extent, we may be a bit of the evangelist here, but this is important, and we're going to get into how we get here. Rob and I have spent a lot of time talking about the SaaS world and sales and how sales are measured in the SaaS world as we got into CRM systems. And in SaaS, there's basically these concepts of MQL, SQL, and clients, which is a marketing qualified lead, which we would call a lead, a sales qualified lead, which means sales has talked to someone and they're like, yes, this is someone that we want, and then clients, which is someone that we want. We have taken this and applied it to the legal industry. An MQL is basically a lead. We've generated a phone call for you, a form fill for you, a chat. We've taken that inbound phone call and we've decided that, yes, we want to have that consultation. And that's where, Cameron, you guys really talk about this as being an opportunity, right? Because otherwise it could be all sorts of things coming in.
Opportunities are just simply anyone that is, reaching out to you. They got your website, they're calling you, they're filling out a form, chatting in, whatever. They are reaching out to you, and hopefully they are someone that has a case, and hopefully they're someone that you can help. And opportunity is just a pre-screened or not yet screened lead, I should say. In Lead Docket terminology, it's not really a lead until someone responds. That's when it's actually being worked and hopefully screened, converted, consultation, whatever needs to happen, then goes from opportunity to a lead.
Okay. And so there's a little bit of a mix on the vernacular here, but the key point here is not all of the things that come in are good, which as lawyers, because you've been screaming at me my entire career about, hey, all your leads are garbage, right? We then take a step that we call AQL, which is, we call this attorney qualified lead, which means you've talked to them and you've decided that you wanted to hire them. Now, depending on the type of law that you practice, or even the way you practice law, you may have an intake staff who's qualified to say, yes, this is a client that we want. And so that doesn't have to be an AQL or attorney qualified, but you may be screening them to be, this is someone that we want. And typically, we look at this by, hey, we sent you a contract. We want to work with you. That's the same in Lead Docket, correct?
Right.
There's a step towards that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And then out of that comes clients, right? Which becomes, yeah, we've signed. And so that signature rate becomes really important. So we're going to get deeper into all of these different metrics and what you can get out of this. But this becomes really interesting. Now, Harlan made the point of it's important to know which leads are not good. And so this is our own data. I'm a marketing agency. And I'm telling you that for us, because we track this, I know 84% of what we do is garbage. 84% of what we count as leads or opportunities in the different vernacular is not someone trying to hire the law firm. And it's different by different marketing channels and it's different for different firms. But on average, we're generating just over a 15% hit rate on what we would typically talk about as leads. And this is where I think the marketing industry does a terrible job because we're so excited about making ourselves look good that we throw as many numbers into this as we possibly can. And they're just not new people looking to hire you. It's opposing counsel. It's your spouse bringing a pizza. It's all sorts of things. And we try and overcount these things to make ourselves look good.
Mockingbird selling you services. The other thing to note is that's a blend over different channels, right? So different channels have different quality of leads, and we know that to be true as well.
Yeah, 100%. So
but the fact of the matter is, Conrad, is you're spending money to get, and it costs you to generate a bad lead. If hypothetically you're about $125 a call, and I want to know every call that comes in, good, bad, and ugly, for many different reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into. Most lawyers. Let me rephrase that. Every lawyer I've ever met on earth walks into their office and says, how many cases did we sign? They never say, how many calls did we get today?
And this manifests itself really foundationally when you think about your intake person, right? If you're not using an automated system like this, the intake person who takes the phone call from the pay-per-click salesperson that looks like a lead in the reporting, but actually knows it isn't, is not going to waste his time putting down the data that this was a bad lead. right? But that's so bad because if that pitch came from a pay-per-click or a local service ad click, or 90% of your Google My Business phone calls are generated by people pitching you on stuff, you need to know this. And this is why these systems that are comprehensive and look at everything are so important, because otherwise it's massively misleading. It's massively misleading.
Yeah, it's fun. It's very interesting, Conrad, when I talk to these firms that are looking to find that answer, right? What is my conversion rate? How many cases did we sign out of total leads we got? They're tracking these leads on Excel spreadsheets and Google Docs, and someone has to physically type in, this person was not a good lead because of this, when it could literally be a click of a button and then you have it for reporting.
And they don't want to do it, and they think they're doing you a favor. They're like, "Oh, I'm running intake, the phone's ringing off the hook. I'm not gonna jot that down." But the bad information, it's almost more important to know the bad information than to know the good information, because otherwise you can blow your kid's college fund chasing pay-per-click salespeople. Okay. So we look at this is out of our reporting. This is Mockingbird reporting, but this is what this funnel looks like. So leads, consultations, AQL, and new clients. This is real data coming from us. And as I built this out, 21 on 709 is about 15%. So 111 on 709 is about 15%. And so what you're seeing here is, if you just count leads, and again, this is real data here, if you just count leads, you're missing so much and you're overcounting dramatically. So,
well, you're also not doing your agency justice, because the agency can, if they know what's coming in, good, bad, and ugly, they can modify, direct your beam, your advertising efforts, and constantly in a more productive position.
100%. Right. And this is why Rob spent the last 2 or 3 years of his life getting deep into systems like Lead Docket, Filevine, and learning how they work, because it makes us better. It makes us better.
And conversely, this is also why a lot of agencies that do what we do stop at leads, right? Because that number looks really good. That's a lot of leads. That's a lot of calls. That's not the whole story, right?
It's like the world of impressions. I got 250,000 impressions, but I'm not interested in impressions. I'm interested in something much deeper than that. There's another thing that you brought up, which really got to me 10, 15 years ago. And a client said, "Give me more leads." Well, what'd you do with the last ones? They weren't any good. What do you mean they weren't any good?
Right. Yeah. The funny thing is, Harlan, this goes back for me listening in on phone calls to our, I still remember this. I got reamed out in front of the whole law. There's a big law firm, top of the building, and their big conference room, blah, blah, blah. The dude walks in and he says, very first thing for a 4-hour session was, "Conrad, why shouldn't we fire you? Everything's garbage." And I was like, the hell, everything's garbage? We're generating all these leads. And so we had this argument about the leads. We convinced him to let us record all of the calls for 3 months and then go back and talk about how good or bad those leads actually were. So I hired a summer intern to do this. This was like the worst job ever. You're going to listen to 3 months of inbound law firm prospects and evaluate them. She came back to me in an hour and she's like, "Conrad, you've got to hear this." I was like, "No, come back to me after a month after you've crunched all the data." And she's like, "No, you've got to listen to this." This was in July. This law firm's voicemail in July still said, "I'm sorry, we're currently closed for the Christmas holiday. We'll get back to you." And they're like, "Oh, the leads are garbage." And you literally heard this lady on the phone who's trying to hire the firm. She's like, "What the fuck?" And she hangs up. And so I sent her back to.
It's the biggest hole in a law firm's bucket,
100%.
and in my opinion, and that's why we went ahead and built Lead Docket. But again, I believe that whatever system you use it. And what you don't know, you don't know. I own the trademark on, but there's a lot of meaning to that. What you don't know, you got to find out. What's not going on in the practice is more important than, well, this is what's going on. And that's how you grow the firm, and especially in this segment of the business.
So one of the things that I find that people don't know all the time, but they talk about all the time, is ROI, right? And so I go to way too many marketing conferences and everyone's talking about maximizing your ROI. Most agencies and most lawyers do not know the calculation for calculating ROI. They just don't know how to do it. And so why are we talking about this? But in order to get the R for ROI, you've got to take this all the way to revenue, and there has to be a revenue component to this. Cameron, how much are people using Lead Docket to tie revenue all the way back to marketing channel to start looking at ROI?
Yeah, Lead Docket it's doing the hard part of actually tracking the lead sources, right? So we're working with Mockingbird, for example, to integrate call tracking numbers and forms and things like that. So the source is accurate. All you got to do is plug in your financials, plug in your marketing spend on your campaigns, and then also enter how much you're making. And the beauty of Lead Docket and Filevine specifically is that it's automated, but no matter what system you're using, you can plug that data into Lead Docket directly and have this ROI calculator in front of you per source, per case type, per attorney. It goes as far as you want it to go.
I think even per client to know exactly what your ROI was on the specific client.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And to get that, you need to be able to tie the marketing channel to the revenue. And frankly, there's lots of systems with that information flows through, but you also have to have the discipline to actually do it on a regular basis and actually have that assessment.
That falls into what we call the process. You either buy into the process and you stick to the process, or you don't.
Yeah, 100%. This is one of my favorite graphs that we built. This is just data out of CallRail. And this is the easiest way to fumble the ball on the 1 yard line is to not answer the phone when people call you, right? And most of you don't have a feel for if you ask yourself right now, as you're watching this, do you know what our firm's phone call answer rate was last quarter? Most of you don't have that at your fingertips. And I will tell you that one of the easiest things to do to make your firm better is to answer the phone. And you can do that just by knowing what that number is. Just by knowing what that number is, it is going to annoy you and you're going to improve it. I can tell you that our phone call answer rate for our clients fluctuates on average, across 100 plus clients, fluctuates between 91 and 94%.
Or even in more of a difficult situation because you're dealing with a lot of digital leads and people don't get back on digital leads. Look, the whole intake and conversion thing is just a horror show.
Yep.
But what's interesting is that you're not going to run into a lawyer that says, my intake is terrible. Of course, people answer the phone. What are you kidding me? Of course they answer the phone. Unless you have these metrics in place and you brilliant in answering phone calls because it'll tell you exactly what's going on in your firm.
And you're, Harlan, I very much agree with this. Actually, this is not true. I rarely talk to someone who thinks that they are doing worse than they actually are. Everyone thinks they are like woebegone and above average. It's very rare that we talk to someone who thinks they're worse. It's usually the people who have a finger on their actual numbers who are worried about it. The people who don't know what the numbers aren't worried about it. And so you have this flip where if you don't know what the number is, you're worse than you think you are. If you know what the number is, you're probably outperforming what everyone else is doing because you care about it and know what it is.
Absolutely.
So get this out of CallRail. Go, Rob. Yeah.
About the funnel data you showed, the actual data, right? The conversion between AQL and clients was 100%. And that client, when we talked to them before implementing a system, they said, oh, we get every client that we want. We sign every client that we want. And they weren't there when we set up the system. They are now. And we know that to be true. So same idea.
That's interesting. It's an interesting comment because I've heard that all my life. We get 94% of everybody that we want. Now, come on. Are you serious? I had a client, really dear friend of mine. And this guy's pretty buttoned up. But a number of years ago, he wasn't as buttoned up. We're looking for 20 cases. And we're standing outside a conference in Jackson Hole. And we were looking at a graph, and his marketing director is showing us all this. And we said, we're looking for 20 cases. We're looking to convert 20 cases on the pool of calls that we got for the month. And Michael said, I didn't want that case. And we said, what about this one right here, this no-show? Right. Oh, I didn't want that. Well, what about this no-show? I didn't want that. And I finally, after 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, I said, why the hell did you make the appointment? Well, I guess we wanted it, but I guess we didn't want it. Now, do you want it or you don't want it? And the most important word I think that we can talk about is conversion, converting that wanted case to a wanted prospect to a client. But it's amazing the arrogance that exists because lawyers, in my opinion, count what they have. They don't look at what they're missing. And that's the crux of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're probably overestimating how good you are. Like, it just happens over and over again. And seeing what you're missing is super, super important. I'm going to show you, just while we're talking really quickly about phone call, answering the phone. One of the ways that leads gets inflated, and this is not a lead docket Filevine thing, but this is a CallRail thing. This is directly out of CallRail. One of the ways that agencies lie about leads, phone call leads specifically, is by not changing this setting in CallRail. And this is a setting that changes, and it only reports on first-time callers. So when your spouse calls you 7 times, a lot of agencies will count that as 7 leads. So you should have access to your CallRail, and you should make sure that this is just checked off. So you're only looking at those first-time.
Could you touch for a half a minute or so on what CallRail is, if anybody doesn't know what?
Rob, you want to talk CallRail, or Cameron?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about CallRail.
Get it.
I love when I ask firms what they're using to track marketing, and CallRail is one of them. And I know the firms that work with Mockingbird definitely use CallRail. When it comes down to it, it's just simply allocating different phone numbers to different sources. So this unique number lives on your pay-per-click campaign. This unique number lives on your Facebook ads, right? So when someone calls that specific number, where they came from, because that number only exists on that campaign. So for example, Lead Docket would integrate with CallRail. So when someone's calling and your intake staff is entering in the information about this new lead, we're going to know that lead source automatically based on that phone call using CallRail, which is the beauty of it.
It's awesome. It's a great system. Go ahead, Rob.
A little unknown fact about CallRail is they actually track, if you sign up for it, it will track the source attribution, meaning where did this come from, for your forms as well. And so that's usually a hole in a law firm's reporting. Call tracking's been around. I think a lot of law firms can wrap their head around that. But attributing your form fill, right, to the actual person, I'm not talking about Google Analytics. I'm talking about that actual person. How did they find you? And that too can flow through automatically to Lead Docket. So you don't have to ask that person to tell you if they came from Google or paid or local or organic.
And not only do you not have to ask that person, but you don't actually have, so that's the worst way to do it. Or the worst way is not to ask. The second worst way is to ask. The third worst way is to have Bill, who mans the front desk and is manually entering data into Lead Docket, manually decide whether or not he's going to take the time to go into CallRail to then add it in. Automate this process, and now you're capturing everything, and that's super key. We have a question from anonymous attendee. How do you prevent lawyers from looking at Lead Docket ROI and deciding that it proves there's no need for doing any other kind of advertising besides digital? No need for branding or TV or billboards because they don't show up in Lead Docket's ROI. Cameron.
Yeah, I love that question. Yeah, and it's tricky because, and I'd love to hear your context and what your thoughts are, Conrad, as well. But things like TV and billboards, they're about brand awareness. If I am watching TV here locally, I'm going to know exactly which lawyer I'm going to call if I ever get into an accident because they're everywhere. Is it hard to track that? Of course, because they're probably not going to call a number on a billboard, and they're probably not going to call a CallRail number on a TV commercial. They're going to Google your firm name and find your number there. You're going to be ultimately a web source. But there's, of course, always ways to gather the data. So, for example, there's a pretty cool address field on Lead Docket that is attached to Google. And guess what? We have a report that shows you a map of where those leads live on Google Maps, right? So that's a really nice way to see, okay, not only where you could place billboards for future advertising, but you can also make assumptions about billboards you have placed in certain areas. So there's a lot of leads in that general vicinity. Also, you can simply ask, hey, do you see our TV commercials? Do you see our billboards? And there's marketing source details fields where you can gather the information and then run reports along signups and even directly with fees and settlements as well.
I think the worst question you could ask, in my opinion, is how did you hear of us? I saw you on a flagpole, or I saw you here, I saw you there. And it may be multiple places they saw you. My favorite question to ask on the heels of this is, have you had an opportunity to see our website? Oh yeah, I'm on it now. And then at some point in the conversation or some point in the relationship, I think you can track down a better answer. But initially, we're so anxious to know what's working that we get garbage information and we put it in and we go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And garbage information is so much worse than no information, right? Because it does become very misleading. Another question. I like this. With regards to CallRail, our firm has a custom 800 number that is universal. Can we still use CallRail? Rob, how would you handle this?
Yeah, so that's a little tricky, but we've done it in the past. You can actually port that number into CallRail and use it as a source number. So if you're using that on billboards, things like that, you can actually port that number into CallRail and then attribute that campaign to that number. But it depends on the circumstance and what we're using it for. But that's generally what we end up doing for folks that are a vanity number, as we call it. But there is a bit of give and take, right? If you're using that vanity number as your primary firm number, you're going to want to mask that to track to understand your marketing sources, because obviously you can't use that number everywhere. And, right, for specific campaigns, what we recommend is, hey, on billboards, on TV, let's use that number for brand awareness, port that in as a source in the CallRail. Everything else we're going to need to mask. So they're not going to actually see that vanity number. They'll see a tracking number that forwards to that primary firm's, they call it the forward to number. But that's generally what we end up doing for firms that have those.
And this is a follow-up question to this. Couldn't you also create a billboard or TV number through CallRail and track that through Lead Docket? I think this is important to make sure that I am a marketing dude, I'm a data dude, but you need to make sure that you're not letting the marketing tail wag your law firm dog. If you have a branded number, 444-44-4444, or 1-800 I'm amazing, or whatever it might be, get Matt, or whatever it may be, I would much rather that brand to work really well for you than for us to have really solid data that your branding doesn't work very well. Because the more you try and track things, the less you can turn that number into a brand. A lot of you are using that number as a brand. The flip side is if you are doing some of these mass torts cases that are heavily TV driven, that are direct response, right? So like you're going to put out the TV ad and it's not a branding campaign. You expect people, 1 in a million people, to see that and call you as a direct response immediately. That I would 100% absolutely run tracking numbers on, because it's a direct response. It's not a brand campaign. And you're going to spend so much money looking for that 1 in a million that you better be tracking that stuff, because otherwise you're just burning it's not your kid's college fund. It's a lot more than it's the future. So I need a better analogy there, but those are my takes on the tracking numbers.
I don't know. It's a pretty good analogy. You get what you ask for in advertising. And people are under the impression I really should, again, this is another opinion of mine. I've only been doing this for, 46, 48 years. And I'm not always right, but I'm not into branding a number. I'm into branding the law firm. I want an easily dialed number. You want to make it as easy for people to do business with you as possible. But you're absolutely right on the tracking. You want to get as definitive as possible. People come to me and they say, what about putting a tracking number on all my different television commercials? Good luck on that, because people aren't going to write it down, and it's just not going to work. It's garbage in, garbage out. Like you said, there's a time and a place for using tracking numbers. You just got to be really smart about it.
Yeah. And my thinking has really evolved on this. I used to be very linear. Everything needs a tracking number. Otherwise, why are you bothering? But it's evolved. All right. Speaking of making things easy, those of you using a overflow call center like a Smith or like Reception, one of the things that I really like doing, and Cameron and I talked about this as we were prepping for this call. This is something I would strongly recommend if you're using that third-party overflow service. If they are just taking what's essentially a voicemail and we'll get back to you tomorrow kind of thing, you may as well just have that old tape recorder on your desk picking up and taking that message. That person is probably still going back to Google to find someone who will talk to them. You can bring that person, that prospect, that lead, and turn them into a consultation by actually having that overflow call center book your consultation. We push our clients to do this, Cameron. That's doable through Lead Docket, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Appointment reminders, things like that would be essential for that client experience. Could all happen through there, and they can easily push that data directly to Lead Docket.
Yeah. So I would really stop thinking about these as answering services. They are appointment setting service. That sounds really cutesy. It's like I should work for Smith or something. But it's an appointment setting service. It's a stop the shop service, right? It is getting someone deeper down your funnel.
Stop the shop. Hashtag leaky funnel. Hashtag stop the shop. Those are now.
I fall back on the opportunity to make it as easy for people to do business and accommodating as possible.
100%.
That's who's going to get the business. You start most law firms are very law firm centric. This is the way we do it. Then why are you begging people to call you?
Yeah.
You've got to be flexible, but you put yourself in the client's shoes always, and that'll solve half of your problems.
All right. That's quickie, but like really important. And I think this is one of the things that we see done poorly regularly, right? It's a voicemail service. It's not. And you have to work with these third parties to make this work. It's not like they'll set up like this, but we throw our weight around to try and make this happen because it's so valuable. All right. Okay. We were talking about this earlier. This is automatically taking call. Rob, can you walk through how this works technically? But this is taking CallRail data and putting it into Lead Docket.
Yeah, so these are actually screenshots from Lead Docket, an opportunity and intake information from Lead Docket directly. And this is powered by CallRail, if you want to think of it that way. And what we do is we essentially hook into CallRail and push that information directly into Lead Docket. We use Zapier, a third party and a middleware service to make that magic happen. But the important thing is to know where to tell the system to put that information so that you can leverage the bluntly fantastic reporting that Lead Docket has within it to start understanding these metrics. And you get a lot of really interesting information, even beyond the source attribution of how did that person find you, what was their last interaction, to actually fill out the form or pick up the phone. You can start understanding, how do our phones convert? What about chat? What about form fills? Things like that. That's how this all kind of works together.
Cameron, anything on this you want to add?
Yeah, Lead Docket directly connects into CallRail, and the data that CallRail is sending, we accept it. When it comes to the back-end fields that shows you keyword search and click IDs and all that fun stuff to get really granular, but we can also take it a step further and pull in like call recordings. So if you have call recording enabled in CallRail, you can actually go back and listen to the quality of the phone call to make sure that your voicemail isn't playing that says you're on close for Christmas, right? Like Conrad mentioned earlier. So
right.
You can have that quality assurance going there as well.
The call recordings automatically thumped in are awesome because it gives, so just think through a normal workflow. You have a front desk or a third party who sets you up with a consultation. Mary's going to meet with you tomorrow morning. But 10 minutes before your call with Mary tomorrow morning, who you know nothing about Mary, you can listen to the call that she had with your intake people and get a really solid feel for how you can help her. Super, super valuable, right? There are these things that yeah, go ahead.
I call recording your telephone calls demonstrative evidence. You're dealing with an extremely arrogant group of people, whether it's doctors or lawyers. Professionals are stubborn. I get to 94% of everybody I want. When you start recording telephone calls and you want to get somebody's attention, send them what you hear, because I guarantee you, in advertising, we guarantee very little, but I guarantee this, they will be shocked. You will be shocked. And when back to this doing business and making it easy for people to do business, you can train your staff. You understand exactly what's going on. There's no bullshit involved.
Right. The management, it's so hard. I think a lot of law firms look at intake as being easy.
But you know what the biggest pushback on recording your calls is? I don't have the time. So, how can I listen to these calls?
Which again, you're fumbling on the 1 yard line, right? You're not listening at like how many platitudes do we need to talk about first impressions or stuff like this is your first impression of the firm. If you're running a third party answering service, are they doing a good job or do they sound like they don't give a damn, right? You need to this is part of running a firm. You need to proactively manage and listen on these calls. I thought what you were going to say, Harlan, and I think this is a legit argument against call recording. Criminal defense firms hate call recording. And I think there is something to that. I think you need to think about your audience. Are you going to lose that prospect because you have that thing that says calls being recorded? Maybe.
It's again, there's a time and a place for everything. I am not in favor. First of all, you got bar rules you have to deal with. Taking a PI call is one thing. Taking a criminal call could be somebody from jail or somebody in a bad situation. Family law is very difficult also. People don't want to record what you're saying. Maybe somebody is listening. There's all kinds of factors. My world primarily is in the PI arena, with the exception of two clients that I have, Mark Amara and Mark Garagos, who are in the criminal arena, and they don't record calls. It's too sensitive. So you just got to cut the line on what is sensible. most mind-blowing thing so far that you've said is it. Let me put it in perspective. And Cameron, you can back me up, and Conrad, I'm positive this has happened to you. If you start doing just what you've said right now to the audience, the audience will see they'll put between 20 and 35% more money net in their pocket from just doing this. Now, how can a man say that? I'm already making this. Or how does he know that? I know it because we've got 700 and some odd people using Lead Docket. When I sold it to Filevine, we had about 180 law firms, and not one client that is using it. Whether it's Lead Docket or whatever it is, Salesforce, whatever it is, that's what the results fall into. It's just that's how mind blowing this conversation is.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
This is not self-serving. We tell people to stop spending money with us and just answer the phone. Think about this. If you answer the phone 85% of the time and you just get to average for us, that has the equivalent impact of improving your marketing by 5%. Increasing your marketing budget by 5% just by answering the damn phone. Just getting to average. So do these things right, because you don't have to spend so much money with me and Rob.
It's funny, Conrad. You and I, we work with law firms all day, every day. And sometimes you literally call into a law firm's office to get a hold of someone you're working with. Do you know how many times I've called a law firm office and it rings for 2 minutes and then literally no one answers the phone? I'm like, what if I was a $1 million case? The next law firm is getting that case. It's confusing.
So we record those and then send them right off to the law firm.
I love that.
It doesn't make me friends all the time, but for the right clients, it's good. Question that just came in from Kevin really quickly. Rob, you can answer this. I arrived a little late, so forgive me if this is already mentioned or asked. Is CallRail carrier dependent, or will it work with any carrier?
That sits in front of. So so know this though, CallRail is a VoIP service as well, but we leverage it for the call attribution side of things. So it actually sits in front of whatever you're using as your phone system or whoever that carrier is through, which I also very much encourage you to think about, right? Because the more you can integrate these tools, your tech stack, the better off you're going to be at scaling that firm and your business. Yeah, that answers your question. It sits in front of the tracking happens, it forwards to your phone system.
CallRail was an agency tool when it first came out. It still primarily is, but they've made it so easy to use that any law firm can use it.
We should get CallRail sponsoring this webinar. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not going to take the place of a Lead Docket, though. It's a tool, and it only is a small part of the process. It's kind of like the carburetor, and they don't even have carburetors anymore. Thinking of motorcycles, but you understand what I'm saying. It's only a portion of the whole process,
but a vital portion.
Definitely.
This is examples of automated capture out of Lead Docket. And so what you're seeing here is exactly where this stuff is coming from. So Cameron, you want to talk about how this actually happened, how to make this work?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. What you're already using has tools on the back end to integrate with other systems. As we just mentioned, having this nice ecosystem of tech stack that plays nicely with each other, like CallRail, that can work with any phone system. Right? Lead Docket works with any website, any web chat, any answering service. So we simply just connect via an API webhook, which, by the way, we do this for you, connect to your website form and work with Mockingbird, for example, to make sure that all the data from your website form submission is populating directly into Lead Docket. Not only the actual information, like the intake questionnaire, if you will, and contact fields, but also the form source. So what type of form was it? Was it like your footer form? Was it your contact us form? And then beyond that, what is the actual campaign? We can track UTM codes and all these fun backend tracking tools to figure out exactly how someone got to your website. So just flows right into Lead Docket, and then you already have it tracked. You can hit the ground running with intake. You're not waiting. You're not letting the lead contact the next law firm on Google. You're responding immediately because we can have automations around that.
And extra bonus points for anyone who can properly identify the Phoenix Foundation in our example here. Just to prove that Robert Williams is as middle-aged man as you can possibly get. One of the things that Cameron mentioned earlier, and we've got a screenshot of, this is a great piece of data. Great data visualization is something I really enjoy, but this is amazing. We were talking about location of those prospects, location of consults, and knowing where your consults are coming from. We do a lot of this at the front side, understanding where your web reach is. What does that look like? But actually understanding where those consults come from, that is just super key. Cameron, how have you seen people use this? Like, I just can't, there's so much you could do with this.
There's actually a lot of different options. I mentioned earlier billboards, like it can help you place billboards and make assumptions about billboards you have placed, but also things like just geofencing, targeting certain areas with web advertising, and also going to events. Just go out in public, maybe giving away t-shirts at the local fair or something. Helps you target for events as well. So there's many different uses. I'm sure you can even think of more beyond that, but anything that's geographical.
I love this. That is so good. Especially, I think, if you're a multi-location firm, if you're opening a new office, we have a bunch of firms that are constantly adding new offices. If you're running that, this is just so valuable to look at over time.
Oh yeah, we have firms that they have a dozen different offices, quite large across the country, and you can filter this report by office, so you can actually see how many pins on this date range and things like that.
So key. Okay, we've talked about this philosophically, but I want to get into the details on this. This is really important. I call these contact lead types or contact types: phone call, form fill, text, or chat. They operate fundamentally differently, and you need to understand that. This is data. This is just one of our reports, and I've got some more data on this, but they really function differently in terms of lead to consult and understanding where your consultations are coming from. We typically see, this is a very general statement, but we typically see about a 50% form to call. Forms are 50% worse than phone calls at turning into consultations, and chat is 50% worse than forms, right? Now, there's a lot that goes behind that, and how people are and how firms are handling those different inbounds in different ways, very influential on that. But don't think that all, and this goes back to me talking about leads, why I hate talking about leads. Leads, they're not all equal, right? They're not all equal. And yet when agencies talk about leads, they're equating chat with call. And by the way, Cameron and I talked about this. Chat is not a marketing channel. The chat vendors want you to think it's a marketing channel. They'll have you pay $20 per chat or some garbage like that. It's not a marketing channel. It's a conversion channel. Your email address is not a marketing channel. Your phone calls is not a marketing channel. Your chat vendor is not a marketing channel either. It's a conversion channel. So that's, I don't have a slide on that, but that just pisses me off when I hear them talk about that. I'm going to use this really quickly. There's a lot of data on here, but what I want you to see here is this is a personal injury campaign. One of the lines here is brand, right? And that is, we're bidding on Smith Law Firm or whatever it might be. The rest of them are car accident lawyer, whatever that might be. You have to take the brand data out of your pay-per-click analysis. Otherwise, it will look like it's performing much better than it actually does. Because the conversions or leads, unfortunately, Google Analytics looks at leads as conversions. In this example, more than half of the conversions are coming from their brand campaign. And if you don't have access to your data and your number, then you don't segment that brand stuff out, you will get really poor data. So for example, in this case, if you include that data as being a new lead, it's $200 per lead. If you take it out, it's $385 per lead, right? And so you need to realize that, especially if you're running pay-per-click campaigns with brand, you have to take that out. Super, super important.
It's on anything. Back to, you said earlier, receiving calls from vendors and so on. You got to filter it out. You got to deal with true data.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're making bad decisions on bad information.
If your agency won't let you see this stuff, one might ask, why
never deal with an agency that isn't transparent. Ever.
So many do. Drives
Never.
me crazy. Okay. We talked really quickly about human and bot chatting. This works. Like, I don't love it, but the chat functionality works. I think you need to be judicious in its application. You need to be capturing. So we showed this before. You need to be capturing lead source and understanding how chat turns into consultation, so you're not pushing. So some of the chat vendors will actually hide your phone number on a mobile device, so you can't actually call. You have to chat. That's garbage, but it does work.
Seriously?
Oh yeah.
I never heard that. That's crazy.
Oh,
I want to get
so
somebody
bad.
on the phone immediately.
Yeah.
So bad. So
Can I tell you a little story?
Tell us a story. Go.
I went to work for a friend of mine, and he said, don't do anything for 3 months. Just tell me what you got. Anyway, so I went into Chicago and realized that they were taking 180 cases in a month. And we got them to use another CM and went up to 300 cases. He cut the media by 100 grand a month. True story. The way I was able to get to 500 cases a month, putting some money back in, is I separated the intake process from digital to the television, and just like at the car industry. And when you talk about getting back to people and having that conversation, that interactive, I found that people that were answering the telephone were chatting with people. Now, you can't do two things at once and do it well. But it's a different tempo. It's a different conversation. It's a different, and you got to be immediate on the chat and the form fills and such. And by completely separating, have a separately trained person that handled that, that was a game changer. It really was.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense, right? The multitasking is difficult, and the expectation of immediacy through chat, like there's nothing worse than you're sitting on chat and you're waiting for someone to spool up. This is being answered somewhere in Uzbekistan, and they're not really following what's going on.
Now, it's a lead, and you have to be on top of it. And again, you make it easy for people to do business. Making it easy means service. Means you answering them and you're satisfying their questions immediately, and that's who gets the deal.
We spoke really quickly about CRM replacing data entry. One of the things that you get out of that is comprehensiveness. You track everything, but you also get accuracy. You don't get typos. You don't get just the mistakes that happen when you do things manually. Cameron, can you talk through creation, like how this happens within Lead Docket? This is because it's not super straightforward, right? It's not technically flip a switch, but it is so important.
Yeah, it's really important that you're not redundant with data entry. If you're typing in someone's first and last name, you should do that once or ideally 0 times if it's coming from a website form. And then instead of having to do it 5 times. So like, for example, best scenario is someone goes to your website, fills out a form, everything they submit, their first name, last name, phone number, email address, case summary, it's all in the intake form and Lead Docket or whatever CRM you're using automatically. And then from there, we can automate different things like contract generation. So fee agreements and HIPAA auths and things like that to populate clients' names using merge codes and stuff like that and templates, right? Same thing with automatic texts and emails. We can have, hello, Chris, thanks for contacting Smith Law Firm. We'll give you a call as soon as we can, right? Things like that. And even all the way through to case management. We're talking about Lead Docket, which is just intake with the whole purpose of getting a lead signed up, ideally, and then pushing it to case management, like, for example, Filevine, where guess what? All the data you gather in Lead Docket is there in Filevine, including documents and things like that. It's really important to have takes up so much time in a law firm, just entering data into different systems. And these people are paying them a salary to make sure that everyone's really efficient and helps just overall be better.
It's also an awful job, right?
Yes.
You guys know this. Every time you fill out forms for your kids, I'm always surprised. Or you go into a doctor and you've got to, I just wrote my first name down on the other form. Why am I doing it again? It's an awful pain in the neck. You mentioned documents, Cameron. Can you talk really quickly about auto-populating fields within documents to make things easier?
Yeah, a lot of firms will use VineSign, which is our e-signature tool that we own. There's also things like DocuSign where they are smart enough where you can upload your documents as templates in VineSign, for example, add merge codes that indicates a spot for the client's first name or the client's address or the case type or the incident date, things like that. Data that's unique to the client that's going to be populated onto a fee agreement or HIPAA auth or something like that. Or we can the data is already in Lead Docket. Those fields are communicating with VineSign, for example. So you can literally be on an intake call with someone, gather the intake, qualify that lead, text them a fee agreement that's already pre-filled because you just completed the intake form. You don't need to type those fields again and have them fill it out while they're on the phone with you. So Don't let that client go, right? Sign it right there on the phone. And there's so many firms that use Lead Docket and VineSign and tools like that to make sure that those leads are getting signed.
We're going to get into velocity, but like velocity meaning the speed through which people go through that funnel. You need automation to make this happen, because what you can't say is, hold on, Mary, let me just fill out your name in this new form that I have to create for you while I like, no, it doesn't work. The speed and automation are two very real things that live together. while we're talking about signing people, I talked about this earlier. The rate at which people turn into, this is one client for us, but the rate at which people turn into clients changes dramatically by, it's not just the consultations, but it's also obviously the clients that follow from that. And then if you drive it all the way through, you can actually look at marketing revenue. There was a question earlier about, I've got all these different places where I'm spending money, right? And this is a lead docket report here. How do I convince people that we should continue spending money on the offline? You're in this example, you're clearly tracking offline, right?
Yeah, I would hope so. The tracking, obviously there's things you can track automatically through call rail and things like form, et cetera. But have that conversation like Harlan mentioned earlier about, hey, did you go to our website? Yeah, I saw your billboards and I knew your firm and things like that. And TV commercials, it's all being tracked.
Yeah. This is a really big, this has to be a really big firm with a pretty wide portfolio of marketing channels that are working.
I do think that it's very difficult to be precise when you have multiple channels.
Yes.
This firm has 15 different avenues, and they show that television is the third biggest resource. It's very hard. People don't say, I saw you on television, or how did you hear of us? I just saw your TV ad. And I think you have to have some grace with that. But the most important thing is that you are tracking your ROI. I just don't want to oversell the fact that when you're dealing with so many tracks, it gets a little murky.
Yeah, Rob, can you talk about
murky that pool even further?
Yeah, go.
Different attribution models, right? First touch, last touch, W, equally weighted. They're interacting. In some verticals of law, it's very binary. I go to Google, or I know the firm, I call the firm, but a lot of longer buying cycles, if you will, that gets even murkier. So I'm with you, Harlan, and I'm a data guy, and I put these systems together, and I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, understand your ROI, know your cost per client. Let that guide you, and understand it takes a mix, and branding and awareness is extremely important, and so is understanding how people are finding you on the web and digitally. Like, it's not one of these metrics, it's all of these metrics.
Yeah, correct. And you can make then intelligent decisions. Just to go back a slide, you had mentioned, Cameron, 2 slides. I look for a 92% conversion rate on wanted leads. Yeah, that's a pretty good conversion rate. And that's what I really target. If you're in the 80s, you're doing well. But if the sweet spot for me is 92% from wanted leads. And that's why your point is so vitally important, to separate your wanted and unwanted leads, and know exactly which are in which pile.
Yeah.
I learned so much from you over the years, literally. And when you had the opportunity, or I had the opportunity to interview you on stage, National Trial Lawyers, you said some things that was so pertinent. I walked away with it and ran with it. And again, it's understanding the different buckets that you put your stuff. The most important thing that you've said to me at that meeting was, make sure you're putting the right data in the right silos, because, and you have said this 3 or 4 times so far in this podcast, garbage in, garbage out. You can't judge your overall effectiveness if you have garbage involved in the good stuff.
And I don't want to sound like I'm pitching lead docket here, but the whole point of these CRM systems, you will get to a size as a law firm. Every firm gets to a size at which you cannot do this with spreadsheets. You just can't, right?
No, you can't follow it up. I think you want to walk into your office the first day, every morning, and know exactly who I'm going to call, who I didn't call, who I converted. And also it's going to be you run your business from this telephone.
Yep.
The whole crux of making more money is converting. You'll make more money converting leads that you've already paid for.
We are close on time. I'm happy to continue going. Harlan or Cameron, are you guys available to keep chatting?
Yeah, I'm free.
Okay. We'll talk quickly. How's that? So this is just more data, more detail on the data. So you've got these graphs. You can dig into these things: lead, cost per lead, acquisition cost, right? Revenue that comes out of stuff. Once you have this data grabbed, you can look at matrices and get into deep things. This is something that is the next slide it starts to get a little bit personal, but some of your lawyers are bad at turning prospects into clients. That AQL number, right? The wanted leads turning into clients, is it below 92%? And that number is very different by attorney, right? It could also be very different by your intake person, right? You compare, for example, I was extolling the after-hour services like a Smith, for example. You should know how they compare against your daytime, right? Are they better? If they're better, you've got a really big problem internally, right? If they're worse, like how much worse, like how do we make them better? But looking at your lawyers and knowing, all right, if we send a wanted lead to Bill, he's below 80%. Why are we doing that? Maybe Bill shouldn't ever be talking to those wanted leads.
I hate sending leads to lawyers because
Talk more.
Oh, it's a pretty bold statement. The
You're
reason
insulting the audience, but go ahead.
No, I'm trying to show them how to make more money.
Okay.
That's what this conversation's about.
Yeah.
The reason it's difficult sending a call to a lawyer is, number one, you're interrupting whatever's on their desk. Most lawyers, unfortunately, want to decide whether they want that case or not, trying the case, looking at all the attributes, and they just spend too much time. If you got the case, don't figure out how much money it's worth while you're talking to somebody. Sign the case up. I do believe in lawyers talking to clients. I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm talking about a sales process here. Right. When you have a lawyer as a salesman, they're very often, more times than none, almost every time, wanting to get off the phone to get back to what they're doing. And that's not selling.
And yet some of them are amazing at this.
Absolutely.
And knowing which ones are is the key.
You're not going to know it unless you have a complete accountability. That's the word that we haven't used yet today.
Yep. So knowing this data and then following up and looking at this. So when you talk about accountability, Rob and I had this conversation earlier today. These are tools, right? This is not going to fix everything. It is the use of the tool that is going to make the difference. It's not just having the tool.
So I went like this when Harlan said, and use it. Please that. Like you can't just have another piece of shelfware. You have to use it.
The phone call that I was on just prior to this is the oldest, most seasoned advertiser in one of the worst markets in America, Las Vegas. And a friend of mine, I'm on the phone with him, and I did a couple of consultations, and dear friend, and he asked my opinion. I flew in, and they have a CRM, and they don't use it because they got pushback because it was inconvenient for the paralegals to use it.
Yeah.
And all these questions, and this is the first advertiser, most established advertiser, fabulous law firm in Las Vegas, which everybody knows is a very tough market. When I went to Chicago, they weren't using, it happened to be Captora, they weren't using it. We put millions of dollars in the owner's pocket by using it. It's amazing that people don't use it. In software, the average person uses camera in 25 to 35, maybe 40% of software that's in front of them?
Absolutely.
Cameron and Rob, how much time do you guys spend training people? I know the answer for Rob, but Cameron, I'm curious how much of, not you personally, but how much of the software's efforts are worked on getting people using and educating?
Yeah, so thankfully, when it comes to Lead Docket specifically, it doesn't require much training, especially if the firm is structured the right way. And what I mean by that is something you mentioned earlier, Harlan, is that the paralegals don't want to use the software because it's inconvenient. First of all, why are paralegals doing intake? The sales structure in a law firm is ideally intake staff, answering service, or whatever you're using. Someone that's dedicated to that intake process. So they know what they're doing when it comes to their day-to-day, gathering lead information, sending out retainers, or getting leads qualified by attorneys or things like that. So when they see that process in a system like Lead Docket, they're like, this is literally my job, but it's automating a lot of what I do. So when it comes to training, it often takes a 1 hour training session. That's it. They're off to the races. And then of course there's endless support and things like that for new hires. And we're always there every step of the way, but it's really, when it comes to having a process, it's really not rocket science.
If you remember, Cameron, when we built Lead Docket and you were our very first employee, such a key individual, you was such a powerhouse in this thing. And I'm not patronizing it. I'm just so complimenting you. You've got to spend time using it. I could be taught something on the computer, and if I don't continually use it, I forget about it. But it's the use of software. When we first made this product, if you recall, my insistence was to make it easy to use, so people use it.
Yep.
That's the biggest pushback on software. You have, not to name names, but there's some very complex software out there that who the heck wants to use complex anything?
Okay. Back
Whenever
to
I
terrible
set up
lawyers.
anything,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
make it as simple as possible and no simpler, right? Like as easy, as automated, as simple. I spend, it's probably a third setting up, a third training, depending on the software. I think honestly, the Docket, there's a lot less training, no doubt, to Cameron's point, but supporting them. And this is where I really harp on our team. We need to support you. We're actually very annoying when you aren't using it because we need this data. And I will say, hey, what do you need? Do you need more training? We send process docs? Like we come in and we help understand the biz ops side of things too. One of my favorite questions, I know we're over and I'm going long here, but one of my favorite questions to ask a firm is ultimately who is in charge of making sure a new lead or opportunity makes its way through your funnel or your process. And often I'm received with, right? And so it's important to have someone in the firm that knows that is ultimately their backside if things are falling through that crack. And if they don't know that, they need to. But it's really hard for me as a third party provider to like see that because I'm not at the firm, right, full time. So think about that. See if you can answer that question. If you can't, change that.
I'm reminded on the easy to use thing of the guy, I'm blanking on his name, the guy who started Lotus. His quote was simplify and then add lightness. I love that. Anyway, moving forward, Cameron, this is a graph from you. This is just revenue by attorney, right? And you can also cut things when we're looking at individual attorneys, consultations, conversion rates, all of this, looking at individuals within the firm, because the bigger your firm is, the more that this has an impact.
Yeah, it's literally as simple as just a field. A lead is signed up, it's tied to a lawyer. That case is going to close in months or a year or however long it takes, depends on the case type, obviously. And then you're going to input the revenue for that, and that revenue is tied to that lawyer, right? Yep. So it's super easy. Super.
And every time you've got a graph, there's supporting data behind this, right? So you can look at how people are performing and what's working and how they're performing individually. We talked earlier a little bit about velocity. Rob, can you talk through this? I love this, and we've got another version of this. This is our own reporting, but we'll show the lead docket version of this. Can you talk about velocity and why we care about it and how it's really changed things?
Yeah, there's a lot of different data you can look at, but we're of the mindset of if it's not actionable, why do you care? What can you get out of it? And the velocity through your funnel. And again, what we mean by that is how long does it take for a lead to become a consultation, and the consultation to become an attorney qualified lead, and then a attorney qualified lead to become a client. If you know that information, you can start improving that process, making that easier for your prospects to move through. One of the things that we identified with this data was a law firm was having a very difficult time ultimately closing those leads that they wanted. And I think it was a lemon law lawyer, but they were finding it was really difficult to get some of the paperwork in order to assess whether they actually have a case. And so we found that employing a person to actually go out and help those prospects get that documentation, whether it's just like a police report or whatever it was, they improved that conversion because it was taking so long for them to close. And so many of them were closing. So it's the power of this data, and to take action upon it is important. But yeah, if your weeks, too long, days, more like it, months.
Or immediate, as we were talking about, right? This can be immediate.
The faster you can get it through, the more money you're going to make.
And Cameron, these are individual leads here that we're looking at. I've blocked out
there are opportunities.
Yeah, sorry. Opportunities.
So leads coming from a web chat, a website form, something that may or may not be a lead. It could literally just be someone filling out your website that says, hey, I want to sell you a new website. But yeah, you can see which ones have been created into leads, which ones were spam, how long it took them to process. So what does that mean? How long were they sitting there in your opportunities list waiting for someone to respond? Because they're, again, calling back from way earlier, they're not yet a lead until someone's actually working them. So when that top one was sitting there for 4 days, 2 hours, okay, why? Let's figure that out. Helps you kind of figure out what's working, what's not.
And again, you got to manage this. You got to look at this stuff and ask why it did take 4 days to go anywhere. Harlan, you'll like this one. I picked this as an example just because of the motorcycle side of this. But I want to make use this as an example. But then, Cameron, I'd love for you to talk about how this works with Lead Docket. I want much more customization on the automation when we're doing follow-up. So for example, this is an example where if you contact the law firm on a page that's about motorcycle accidents, when you come back to the firm, you're going to get imagery around motorcycle accidents. Your follow-up is going to get, instead of generic personal injury garbage, you're going to get stuff specifically about motorcycle. Relevant content, sorry. Display advertising should all be focused on motorcycle. How does this work? Because this is so amazingly powerful. How does this work with Lead Docket?
Yeah, so we can automate different workflows. And really what a workflow is in Lead Docket is really tasks, telling someone in the firm to do something, and then also automatic texts and automatic emails. So one of the variables on a workflow is like a case type. So if someone fills out a form that's on your motorcycle accident page, we can have the case type be motorcycle accident. So guess what? We can automatically text them, automatically email them saying specifically about their motorcycle inquiry or something like that to make it tailored to them down to the actual, what are they looking at on your website and things like that. So we can target them even more. And it's going to make it look way more personable, even though it's coming from a robot, which they don't even know, by the way, because we're pulling in the client's name and stuff to help them with that client experience, get that case.
So good. And at scale, these small customizations are the difference between a negative and a positive ROI.
It's selling. It's selling. It sales to some people are a dirty word. We're all salespeople, whether it's your minister or my wife trying to get me to take the garbage out. She's selling me on the garbage. Got to go out. We're all selling something, and the more relevant, but it's the client experience that we have to really understand. Accountability, client experience.
So this next one is, I love on the client experience side of things. This next one is awesome. One-on-one video emails, right? So I talk regularly about the importance of building an individual relationship with people. And it's very easy to take that consultation and do a quick review via email, record yourself using your laptop that you've already got all the hardware to do this, and then sending that out via video, right? No one's doing, you guys aren't doing this. You're not doing this. Most of you aren't doing this. And yet it's so powerful to sit down and say, oh, okay, this is what we talked about. I'm sorry to hear about your dad. The next steps that you should take are X, Y, and Z. You'll hear from us by Tuesday. Really hope things are going okay for you. When you do that immediately, it takes 3 minutes. You send it out. So this is.
Well, it depends on how much you want the relationship. You got to work at the relationship. That's the third most important word that we're bringing up today, relationships. Sales are relationships.
Yep.
He who has the best relationship gets the sale.
There's a great quote by a guy named Chris Walker who says, how you sell is why you win. And it comes down to these relationships. So this is just one small thing that you can do. All right. We started with the funnel, right? MQL, SQL, turning to clients. This is your kind of high level, the Lead Docket high level dashboard that looks at all of these pieces. I don't know. Do you guys have data, Cameron or Harlan, on how frequently people are logging into this kind of
we log
piece?
Yeah, we log all user activity, and you can drill down pretty far to see who's looking at reports and stuff like that. Now, mind you, only certain people in the firm should have access to these reports at a entirety, but you can easily see that.
I remember early on, Cameron, we had a client that said, we don't Lead Docket it doesn't meet my needs. It's not robust enough. And you went back and you said, we only dialed in 5 or 6 times.
Right.
So how the heck does he know?
Yeah. And kind of mirroring that, Harlan, I'm not going to mention names or anything, but there was a client of ours who's a pretty large advertising client. They are pretty dominant in their market. And they were like, Lead Docket reports are not good. I'm like, what do you mean? So I went into the Lead Docket system and they weren't entering any data financially or really doing a really good job of tracking these. Again, you have to use this, right? Lead Docket isn't going to fold your laundry, right? You have to, there's some input that goes into this. And they were like, okay, I'm going to talk to my marketing team and get this figured out because there was all zeros there. I'm like, oh, well, the data has to be there for this to actually show you stuff.
The reports are terrible. They don't show me anything because there's nothing in them.
One, Lead Docket's reports are fantastic, this dashboard alone, but you guys have so many out of the box reports that I actually end up building in a lot of other CRMs because they don't exist. So was shocking to hear. And two, we haven't figured out a way to take the humans out of this completely. And I don't think we ever will.
I don't think that you want to. We're still a relationship-oriented society. This sales of relationships. I don't think you want to take it out, the human out of it.
You will be more effective with the humans in it. You just will.
But please use it.
Yeah, but use it. All right. I apologize for going long as I often do. There's still a bunch of people on the call. If anyone has any questions, we will hang for an awkward 60 seconds. Otherwise, feel free to drop. But you've got a chance to ask Rob anything about CRM and integrations. You got Lead Docket, Filevine awesomeness here. If you want to dig any specific questions, it's super, super happy to answer them.
And Conrad, can you reconfirm that everyone will receive a recording of this as well?
Yeah, so my apologies up front for the scheduling headaches. I'm going to take this recording. I'll do post-production on it. I've started using amazing technology that will remove all the filler words like ums and ahs, which I didn't do a lot of. That's awesome. I've really started enjoying doing post-production on video. So we will try and have this launched, if not tonight, but certainly by tomorrow. And I'll follow up with everyone to make sure that you have an access to the recording. I know we went long. We covered a lot of different things. You may want to fast forward or move in and around. So we'll make that very easy for people as well.
So in our parting words,
yeah,
Cameron, what do you think is the most important thing you want your viewer to know, other than to call you to find out how you can help them? But very seriously, let's get some takeaways.
Oh, that's tough. On the spot. There's a lot of takeaways from this conversation, but I think number one is just sticking to a process. If there's not a nice flow of process in your firm, from lead first reaching out, even before that, even setting up the campaigns, right? The whole thing should be tracked, should be a very organized process. There should not be Google documents, spreadsheets, papers on desks, things like that. It needs to be very organized and structured using software, a tech stack that all communicates with each other. That's ideal.
The process.
I would echo that. And I would say, please use what you have. A lot of you have. Start using it and you'll see an improvement. And automate what makes sense. And I will say this, I don't think this came up. Word of caution with automation, right? It is a relationship business. What makes sense? Automating everything does not make sense. It's actually very difficult, and you'll spend too much time doing that, and it won't be effective. So there's a lot of things that make sense to automate that I think Lead Docket makes very apparent by what you can do and what you can't. But those are the takeaways I would leave you with.
Awesome. Harlan, parting words.
What you don't know, you don't know. And what that means, and many thousands of people use it, I trademarked it years ago. What it means is you've got to figure out what you don't know, what you don't see. That's where the details are. That's where you improve your business. If we keep walking into our offices and say, how many cases did we sign? That's great. I want to know how many we didn't sign so I can sign more. And that's really important. And no matter what piece of software you use, have somebody in your office be appointed as that expert so that they can not only make sure that everybody's using it right, but you can train people to come in and so on. Software is a great thing only if you use it. And my last thing on advertising is, remember, you get what you ask for.
All right. Get what you asked for. Thank you, everyone. I know we went long. I know a lot of you hung on, which means we were doing a good job of being engaging and awesome and delivering gems. So thank the three of you. Really appreciate you guys joining me, and we'll see you around the internet.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Peace out.
Bye.
Appreciate it.